Here I was really torn between playing b4 or knight e4. They're both good, so that's why it was really hard to decide which one is better. b4 seemed a bit more forcing because I really thought he has to take on d4 then. But knight e4 seemed also very strong because I get my knight close to d6 or to f6. But at the same time, I wasn't sure if he can just castle or play some other move after knight e4 and just ignore it. Whereas before he really can't ignore the pieces attacked. So I think that's why I play b4. In a way, this move before is really the first sacrifice that white made in this game that black accepted. Like white always has some hanging pieces, but before is the first time black actually accepted the sacrifice, and it's not a real sacrifice because I get to play knight f5 and I get a bunch of material back very soon. And in a position like this, a pawn doesn't really matter. What matters more is whether the bishop is on that diagonal or whether my knight is attacked on c3, but tactically it all seemed to work, so I played it. Here I thought he was gonna play something like queen c6, and then the idea is that if I take on b4, then he can take on f5, and he kind of covers up the f file, and he covers e4 and d5, so I'm not really sure if I have all that much. But I guess he was not in the mood to leave the bishop hanging, so he just played queen a5. So in this position, if you ask the computer, he thinks like it's +10 for white. The white's crushing completely, but in the game it wasn't all that clear to me. I wasn't sure if I'm winning all that clearly. The position of course looked crushing, but there's no forced mate, so there's just a very strong attack. So I thought, well, the last two games I played against Alfred, I had a almost winning position in both games, and I lost the first one and drew the second, so I thought, well, I just really have to not screw up this one. This would be a real shame to screw up a game like this, because the position is completely devastating. Black hasn't castled, his king starts to go back and forth, the pieces aren't developed, and I haven't even sacrificed anything yet, really, except for the silly b4 pawn, which I'm getting back now. So I was really nervous at this point about screwing it up and not winning. Here I thought he might go king g8, just to avoid repetition. I thought even in a crazy position like this he might want to avoid repetition because he's a very sharp player and he doesn't want to make a draw. And then if he plays king g8, then I thought that I could try something like queen f4, even though I wasn't sure entirely if that works or not. He thought here for a while actually, but he decided to not go king g8. Here I was getting really happy because I did not drop my knight on e6 and I managed to play knight d5, so he has a piece hanging and I have more and more threats coming in, and I thought his last chance of course is to try to take on g7, but then I thought I could play bishop h6 and king g8, and I thought there would be something fun like queen e7, and I was trying to calculate lines, and I thought queen e7, queen b6, he could try king h1, and then he could try queen e6, and I couldn't really see if I had a clear win. I could play queen d8, but then he goes knight f8, I guess, and he's still kind of holding on, which is pretty crazy. Well, I guess if he goes knight f8, then I could play knight f6. So it looked pretty good if he takes on g7, and at the same time, if he doesn't, then I could, like say, if he does take, and I can't make it work with bishop h6, I thought I could always bail out and take on b4 with the knight. So it seemed reasonable to play knight d5 here. And here I saw that I was completely winning, because this is it. He can't go king e8, then I go knight d2 c7. He has to give up a queen and everything else. And if he goes king to g8, which is the only reasonable option, it seems like he's maybe hanging on because all the pieces are up in the air. But this is it. Then I go queen f6, and he gets checkmated with 2 knights if he takes on f6, and then if he doesn't take, then I'm threatening on mate on f7 and g7. So that was looking pretty nice. Overall, it was a very nice game for me to play. The champion Jack Hughes said after seeing the game that it was a very nice game. So I was very happy with my preparation here, because like the game was really won during the preparation stage. It's really hard to sacrifice a pawn for nothing and develop the attack when you're not really sure if it's working or not, if the attack is correct or not. It's much more pleasing and satisfying to lead the attack when you know that the sacrifice is sound and there's really very little risk in a position like this. And white had very clear play against dark square weaknesses that black had, and also playing just to keep the black king in the center. It all seemed very logical and clear at the same time. To defeat such a strong opponent in just 22 moves is not a very common thing to do, so I was very happy with that too.